This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant and Pest Geek Podcast with Living the Wildlife Podcast. Always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and or other control methods to manage pests. Wildlife Control Consultant, LLC, Pest Geek Podcast, Living the Wildlife Podcast, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their or his affiliates are not responsible for followers' use of the information provided here. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, bringing you another episode of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. Glad to have you on board today. As some of you may know, I took last week off, so went back east, visited some family for Thanksgiving. I trust that you enjoyed your Thanksgiving as well, and that we're winding out the year here. So thought we'd take some time and talk a little bit about sales. But before we do that, let me just ask you to definitely subscribe to our channel. If you have feedback, definitely send that to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. I like to get your comments and thoughts and ideas for future shows. One of the shows I was asked to do was something on feral hogs and something on feral chickens. I have never heard a request about feral chickens. Feral hogs I've certainly heard about, but never feral chickens. If any of you out there have experience with feral chickens, I would love to do an interview with you. That totally blew me away. I guess it's quite a problem out in Hawaii. And so let's do a little conversation about feral chickens. So if you have some thoughts in that area, definitely reach out. I'd love to do an interview on feral chickens because it's certainly something I would have to do a little bit of research on, as I don't know anything about feral chickens. So it's strange how the vertebrate pest world is definitely diversifying, to be sure. So again, that's wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Do take a few moments as well. Visit us on Facebook. You can join our group with the Pest Geek Podcast family on our Facebook page. Join us to join the revolution, as Franklin calls it. So we'd be glad to have you on board. Hope you're doing well, and let's try to end the year quickly. Not quickly, financially prosperously. So many of you, I'm sure, are having struggles with getting labor, or you're probably getting tired and you're looking forward to vacation. But let's end the year strong and safe while you're out there. Well, one of the things, as many of you know, I do a fair amount of reading. I don't read as much as I used to, partly because my day job now, I do a fair amount, and so you kind of wear out a little bit when you're home. But I do read, and I try to read fairly broadly, though I am definitely, as time goes on, narrowing my focus to go a little bit deeper into various subjects. But one of the things I always struggled with when I had my service business was I struggle with sales. Part of that is with my, as I now know, which I didn't know then, is a little bit of Asperger's, which definitely makes it difficult to emotionally connect with people in some ways. So you get a little standoffish, you tend to be a little bit more concrete, and you miss some of the nuances of words. So that's something I've learned about in my more recent years. I'm getting up in age a little bit, but I wish I knew it sooner. I could have definitely tried to address that. But sales is certainly something that I struggle with, and I suspect a lot of wildlife control operators and pest control professionals struggle with sales as well. And I think, let me speak personally, part of my own challenge with sales is it always sometimes seemed a bit contrived. We have some negative experiences with salespeople. We feel we're getting ripped off at times, and that people tend to be a little bit schmoozy and they tend to overstate things. And so part of our challenge is sometimes we go the opposite direction and we understate things. And so both of those are relatively inadequate, where we don't sell something we know the client needs, we know we can satisfy what the client has, and we just fail to help the client come to a decision, because sales is something where you're actually trying to help the client resolve a problem. You're trying to help them make a decision. And so you do have to believe in your product. And so one of the authors that I've certainly read let me hold this up. Let me see if I can get this in a good picture for you here. This is the Grant Cardone. I'm just see if I'm getting too much blur there on the screen. This is Grant Cardone, the Closer's Guide, and the Closer's Survival Guide. And I've actually found it a rather fascinating book. And I think sometimes with sales, you have to see things multiple times in order for it to get through. And sometimes with education, we think we're going to read one book and that's going to solve our problems. And we're just going to have all the answers. But that's really not true in many ways. One of the things that wildlife control operators and PCOs need to understand, that sometimes you have to hear something multiple times in different ways, structured differently, so that we can grasp it. And sometimes we have to get it kind of beat into our head that this is the way to go. I think this book was more meaningful to me now because I've read a fair number of sales books. Let me kind of hold that up again to the screen here. The Closer's Survival Guide by Grant Cardone. And I think that the book was more meaningful to me partly because I was at a place emotionally to be ready to hear some of the things he had to say. Maybe your experience will be different. Maybe this will really click with you right off the bat, maybe because you have better sales experience than I do. But I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of how this book hit me. And so I was frankly quite impressed with the book. And I'm not out there grinding away like many of you are, trying to make a living doing your service job and satisfy customer needs and taking care of yourself and all the other obligations you have as being self-employed. And I was rather impressed with this particular book. Maybe it was because I was more emotionally prepared for it and intellectually prepared for it. Because as I said before, and I want to really reiterate this, I am not an expert in sales. I can't say that I'm very good, so it's something I struggle with. And I suspect many of you struggle with it as well. And I found the book helpful for me. And I think it would be helpful for many of you. Now, one of the things about Grant's book is that he is often speaking in terms of selling a product. However, the strategies he talks about in this particular book will help you even with dealing with service clients, because if you just treat your service as like a product, the principles are going to be the same. And so he calls his book The Closer's Survival Guide, and what his philosophy is, and I have to say, I can't reject it. It seems like a tautology. It's true by definition. I took some notes, and what he said was the close is the goal. Now, what's the close? The close is when the client hires you, buys the product, orders your service, signs the contract, gives you that deposit. They're committed. They are full on. You have made the sale. That's the close. So many of you probably already know that. For those of you who don't, just want to be sure we're all on the same page. The close is when the agreement is reached. Think of it as the proverbial handshake. The agreement's been made. The contract's been signed. And his point is that nothing happens until the close. So when we're selling, if we're not getting to the close, we're not doing anything. You've wasted a lot of time, but you have not done anything without the close. And so all of your work with the client is to get them to the position to help them make a decision to make the close. And that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. let me give you an example of why a close is so important and why you have to be careful what you say. You've probably been in many situations where you felt the energy from the client. They were about ready to sign on the dotted line, and maybe you said something that turned them off, or maybe the atmosphere changed, or maybe you tripped something up, or the client asked you a question that you didn't quite have a confident answer for, and all of a sudden they tell you, oh, I got to think about it and I'll get back to you. You've lost the opportunity to make that sale. Those issues are what he is going to help you address in the close, this closer's survival guide. It is laser focused on the ending part of your arrangement with the client. This is not a book that's going to help you, craft your proposal to the client. It's not going to give you those trick words to get them going. It's going to help you, I'm going to just say, probably the last 10 minutes of your conversation with the clients, where you are driving that client toward a decision to buy your service, to hire you to do something. That is what he's focused on. And what he starts with is addressing your demeanor and your attitude. And this has been a struggle for me. And again, I've talked about my Asperger's already, but it's also been, did I believe in the product? And I'll tell you, for many of us in the wildlife control field, the issue is, do you believe in the quality of your service? Now, when I was in business, we were in the earlier years of the industry, there were a lot of things we didn't know. I was doing things on my own because I didn't have anybody to teach me. And that lack of confidence, that lack of familiarity with the field, and where you're just kind of working your way through the process, affects how you sell, because the client feels that lack of confidence. They feel that energy. They understand that, oh, maybe he's not as confident about this as possible. Now, we all know salespeople that are overconfident, right? This product's going to change your life, and you're going to be young again, and you're going to lose all this weight, and you're going to, we've seen all that nonsense, right? But on the other side, when you lack the confidence in a particular technique or service that you're providing, because when that client says, are you going to be able to solve my problem? And if you can't say definitively yes, that's going to be a big issue, right? Now, in fairness, there are issues in wildlife control where we can't fulfill the client's request simply because the client's being irrational. A client who says to you, I want you to guarantee another raccoon's not going to come in my backyard. Well, right away that you could guarantee that because you could put their house in a cage, but the client's never going to buy that. And you know that. And so I used to just tell people, I said, well, yeah, they would say, I want my lawn to be mole free. I said, well, pave your yard. Make it asphalt. I can guarantee you won't have another mole again. Now, so part of that's being I got a little snippy with clients, which wasn't certainly, I'm not recommending you to do that, but sometimes just some of the things clients would say, just stupid. I mean, let's put it point blankly, just dumb. And if they thought about it for 2 minutes, they'd realize how stupid it really is. I mean, one of my things was like when people would say, well, trapping doesn't work. And I'll say, what do you mean it doesn't work? Well, the animals will come back. And I'd say, well, why do you cut your grass? Cutting your grass doesn't work either. And they'd stare at you, and then some of them would get it, and others would realize, you'd say, well, because you have to cut it again. And then some of them would understand it. They were like, oh, right, yeah, I guess you're right. So they realize how silly it is. Those are situations where a client really doesn't really feel the pain, right? But you understand that if you're not confident about a bird control technique, if you're not confident about a particular trapping technique or an exclusion method, the client's going to sense that. So you're going to need to be sure that you get the training you need to be sure you have the confidence to do something. Now, I would tell you, if you lack the confidence, it may be worth your while to do some of this work at a very low price to get the experience you need so you have the confidence. Otherwise, you need to go out and get the training, spend the money, get the training you need so that you can have that emotional confidence. So when you look that client in the eye, you can say your business is going to be the last thing they're going to need, and that's going to solve their problem. If you lack the full commitment to your service, to your product, you will not be a good salesperson, period. And I can attest that that's certainly been true for me. If you don't full on believe that you have the answer. Now the answer to get that confidence is not just to lie to yourself. The way to get that confidence is to actually be able to get the training you need, to get the experience you need so that you have that confidence and can back it up with results. Okay. I don't believe in lying to clients. Those of you who've been following my podcast, I don't believe in lying to clients, period. Full stop. Don't lie to your clients. Now, some wildlife control operators, maybe many, I don't know, but I know some, because I've heard them, they believe in lying to their clients. Oh, I'm going to save their emotion. No, I don't believe that. No. You give the client the truth that the client, no matter what, always knows you told them the truth. They may not like it, but you told them the truth. Because remember, when you are, as Thomas Sowell says, when you're complimenting someone, you're helping yourself. When you tell someone the truth, you're helping them. And we should always be in the business of helping our clients by telling them the truth. So one of the things that Grant Cardone just bangs a drum on, and he doesn't do it in a hard way in the sense, but he mentions it enough in the book that you have got to get to a place where you're confident in what you're selling. If you're not confident in what you're selling, get confident. Get to that place where you are confident. Otherwise, you're wasting your time selling. Okay. All right. So that's point number 2. So the first point is you need to recognize the value of the close. Nothing happens with your business until the sale is made. Point number 2, you got to believe in what you're delivering for your client. What are you offering your client? You may say, I just feel so dirty. I feel like I'm ripping them off. Well, then you got to get over that. Do you value your work? Now, this is one thing we had a struggle with in the early parts of our industry. A lot of people came from the fur trade and they were like, oh, I'm making $25 for a raccoon. And when for fur, I'd only get $8 for it. And this is great. I'm rich. Well, they really weren't rich because they weren't factoring in the taxes and the liability insurance and all the other things, right? And they didn't understand the value of their time and their experience, and they undersold themselves. I think we're at a place now in our industry where we're getting about a fair payment. Maybe I think we could do better, but we often don't have the regulation that helps our industry drive prices higher. And that's a subject of another podcast that I've given already in the past, where I talk about the importance of the value of regulation to create a guild for our industry. But I'm not going to go down that road today. But I think we're getting there, and you have to have that confidence. And the reason what he says, what Grant Cardone says, and this is very important, this is something a lot of people don't understand about capitalism, is they see capitalism as predatory, that you are a business and you're ripping people off. And that is a very negative, skewed, jaundiced understanding of what capitalism is. Capitalism is the free exchange of money for services, money for goods, value for value. When you buy something, what you're saying is that what I need is more important to me than what I have. And I'm willing to give up what I have to get what I need, because what I need is more important to me than what I have. So it's about the voluntary exchange of goods and services for the mutual benefit of both the business and the customer. That's what capitalism is. So unfortunately, we have a lot of socialists today, and a lot of them are unfortunately our young people because we haven't trained them properly. We've allowed them to be indoctrinated with this notion that if we're just all sharing, when no one's sharing. You look at people who are leftists, they're not sharing their money. A lot of these people are extraordinarily wealthy, and they're not sharing their money. They're living in gated communities, and they want you to share your money. And that is something that's just illegitimate. Okay. So what Grant Cardone says, he has a comment here, and he calls it the winner's exchange. And what he says is, the winner's exchange occurs, and this is what we should strive for when we're selling things to our clients, that the value of what was received is felt to be greater than what was given. That's the winner's exchange. That when what you're giving is worth less to you than what you're receiving. When both parties feel that way, that's the winner's exchange. So his point is stop thinking of yourself as ripping off the client. You need to start thinking of yourself that you are providing a service that you know the client needs. And certainly that is true in the wildlife control field. We go to places where people they have massive squirrel damage in their house. They have rodent damage inside their building. They're suffering significant damage from wildlife. Sometimes there's disease threats. Sometimes there's physical threats. We're providing an important service to protect property and public health. And if we don't believe in what we're offering, then we're not going to have that winner's exchange. We're not going to help the client get out of the conditions that they're in. And so he really deals with your attitude and your frame of mind. And that can be very helpful in working through that, because you have got to be committed with that, to that winner's exchange, and you can help the client get to that place. And he gives some other tactics here that I just want to list here. And he says, when you lack knowledge or wisdom, the client says no. And that's why he emphasizes the importance of being educated, in whether you go out and get that education directly or whether you learn it through hard knocks. And obviously, Grant Cardone wants you to learn it through education rather than through hard knocks, right? So that certainly makes sense. So there's proactive. If you're listening to this podcast, you are being proactive. You are trying to improve yourself without having to make mistakes. That's what education is. Why? Because trial and error is expensive, right? And you're wanting to prevent that. And so he says, look, you want to learn this in advance so that you don't have to go through all the pain and lost business that can result because you're a poor salesperson. He has another quote here, which I think is really clever. And he says, fear is a sign that you don't know something. Now think about that for a moment. Let me repeat that again, because I think it really spoke to me. Fear is a sign you don't know something. So if you're afraid of selling, I certainly don't love selling. I think I've made that clear. And I would suspect some of you in the audience don't like selling either. But if you don't like selling it, what are you afraid of? Because what Grant Cardone argues is that you can control your destiny, in the sense when you master how to sell. And basically, and selling for Grant means closing. Because you haven't sold until the client has signed in the dotted line. Another principle that he speaks of is the difference between complaints and objections. Now, if I've understood him correctly, a complaint is basically a client whining to you. Oh, this is too expensive. When you know that you're not charging an inappropriate fee. I mean, if you're charging someone $1,000 an hour to trap a skunk, and the house is 2 doors down from you, I think that's outrageous. Okay. Now I doubt anyone out there is doing that, right? I mean, even if you were having to call out at 2:00 in the morning, I think that would be outrageous. Nevertheless, if you're charging someone where you're getting, $250, $300 to set up, that's not unreasonable, right? If you charge a flat rate or whether you charge by the animal, I don't know. But if you're getting $400 for that job, I'm not sure that's unreasonable, given what you have to pay for in insurance and liability and, your mileage and then your experience, that I would not say is outrageous. Okay. You have to be sure you understand that's a complaint by the client. That's not really an objection. You have to distinguish when your client brings up something. Is it a complaint? Because Grant says ignore the complaints. Because if you acknowledge the complaint, you're actually giving it legitimacy. It's like your kid coming home from school. Studying's hard. They're whining about whatever. You as a parent, you're just going to sit there and say, buck it up, right? Get up. If you're a male, most likely you're going to say, deal with it. But if your child comes home and say, the teacher, I don't want to go to school because I keep getting beat up. Well, that would be an objection, because that'd be a legitimate reason not to want to go to school, right? So if your client has an objection to you, an objection for your work, you need to create a book of those objections and how you're going to respond to those objections. And what he does in this particular book is he actually goes through a bunch of closes to help you work through some of the more common objections that clients have, the stall tactics that they'll use, and to try to help that client get over the finish line and sell. Let me kind of put this in more concrete terms for you. The first 89 pages, and I'm going to kind of hold this up to give you an idea. So this little portion here, these 89 pages, talk about the philosophy of selling. It talks about your attitude, the importance of the close, how you need to get yourself in a proper mindset. The rest of the book, so basically the next 4/5 of the book are all about his closing wording, how he helps the client get to the end. And he has the delivery close. He has the unavailable party close. He has the agreement close, the budget close. I'm just looking at a few of them here. The apology close. Can't take it with you close. Leave me some paperwork close. That's where you're dealing with it when a person wants you just to leave the paperwork there, how to get them to sign off. Treat yourself close. The discount close. The now and later close. And then he has on the second page, so he has the close on one side, right? And then he has on the other side a place for you to write out how you would adapt his language for your particular product or service that you're selling. And he encourages you to commit these tactics and these closes to memory. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do all of them at once, but that you have them in your back pocket, because a lot of them are just variations on maybe a core 20 closes. They're variations on that core 20, and don't quote me on that, but I'm kind of giving an idea. He has about 20 closes, and then he has little variations on them to make alternative closes. But if you can get those core strategies down, you can have those in your back pocket, so when a client gives you a stalling tactic, you can pull out that response and keep directing them back to signing on the dotted line. And is this going to work for every client? No, of course not. But what it does is it increases your closing ratio. You're always going to have some people that simply, they're not going to sign the dotted line because they know they can't afford it, right? Well, that's obviously not your client. Maybe that should have been something you dealt with earlier. But there are going to be other clients who you know have the money and you know they need your product and they just need help getting over the finish line. And these are some closes that are going to help you. I don't make any money on this book. I purchased it, and I just thought you folks would be interested in my thoughts on it. It is a very quick read. If I know a lot of guys that don't like reading. The first, 89 pages are basically just a lot of narrative text, and he gives you some strategies and commandments or rules of selling. And then the remainder of the book is really fast reading. It's just little snippets. And you could, those of you with employees who are out there selling, you could have this in your own little in-house training and just provide these examples of closes and where you could maybe model some of these objections and closes with clients to help your workers get more sales. To help your particular business. But the Closer's Survival Guide by Grant Cardone, I'm impressed with it. So let me give you a little bit more information about it. When did he publish this? Let's see. It's published in 2009. I went on Amazon. It is not available right now. I went to Grant Cardone's website, and it is presently not available as well. It's for pre-order, so it looks like he's probably trying to, he probably wants to, he's got maybe another printing coming out soon. I don't know, but right now it's just pre-ordering. I thought about you might be able to find something used here, but I think if you're going to buy a book, and the prices I'm seeing here are $25.60, I don't know if there's shipping on top of that. Like I said, it wasn't available on Amazon, even as a used book, which kind of surprised me. You may be able to look elsewhere to find it, but I think if you pick up a copy, I think you'll be happy with it, and you won't find it so heavy that it's not something you couldn't put to use very, very quickly, because it certainly impressed me. It says here in the back cover there are 120 ways, he says, to close the deal. And I think that if you break it down, there's probably 20, maybe 30 core closes that if you got those down, you can handle pretty much any objection a client has to get them over that finish line if they're open to it. I hope it helps you. I hope it increases your business. I know it certainly helped me. I'm looking forward to maybe trying it out in my own business here. I don't have a lot of opportunities for sales, but nevertheless, I think it will help. It's got something that's going to help you in terms of online sales. It's really face-to-face when you have the client directly in front of you. And I think you want to check it out. Grant Cardone, it's Cardone, The Closer's Survival Guidebook. Over 100 ways to ink the deal. Published in 2009. You can go to the Grant Cardone website and check that out as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it helps make more money for you, that you can then become more prosperous and deal and also handle the problems your clients really need you to handle them for, because you have an important role in our community, in our industry, in our lives. People need your services. Help them get control of the nature that's driving them nuts and help protect people and property. And that's an important role. Never forget that. You have a dangerous job, but you also have an important job, and you do valuable work for society, helping them resolve some of these conflicts in a responsible, environmentally responsible way. And I would even say a humane way, right? If not humane like the Humane Society says, but humane in terms of you're just being respectful for the animals you're dealing with in a cost-efficient manner. And I think we want to have animal welfare, and this is something your clients want, and you have that service to give them. Take the time, do a little work on your sales skills, make this year a very prosperous, financially secure year for you, and I think you're going to find it that's going to help put money in your pocket without having to spend a whole lot. I think you'll find something valuable out of it. Well, this has been Living the Wildlife Podcast. Again, do take do take the time to subscribe to our channel. Definitely drop me a line for comments and questions and suggestions for future shows. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And then, of course, if you have some criticisms, pass those along as well. I'd love to hear those as well. Well, maybe love is the wrong word, but I'd like to hear about those as well to try to improve the show. And again, be careful out there, folks. Be safe as we're starting to get into snow season and all that, and definitely take some time off and enjoy that with your family and loved ones, so that you remember we're not living to work. We're working to live. Always make sure you have some time to live. Again, this is Living the Wildlife. Why is it Living the Wildlife? Well, because we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. Take care, everyone.